Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is about the practical guide to mastering DSCSA compliance. My name is Emma Bank, your marketing campaign specialist from Engineering Industries Excellence and your moderator for today's event. So before we go into the actual webinar, I just want to explain a few key points to you before we get started. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat where it says questions and the question boxes, and this will allow us to see them, to answer them at the end of the discussion as we have time to do so. And also in the handout section of the panel, you can see two guides for you to download, a DSCSA guide and the DSC Solution 2-pager. So you can access those later. And lastly, we are recording this webinar and we'll send you a recording afterwards. So I'd like to introduce to you today our two speakers. Mark Bleckink is the Managing Director of Movilitas.Cloud at Engineering Industries Excellence. And his background is in chemical engineering, and he has years of experience implementing a variety of factory automation projects along various companies, which has led him to become an expert in track and trace software solutions. So he's also part of the Healthcare Distribution Alliance Board for Drug Supply Chain Security Act, also known as DSCSA, ensuring that compliance. And our second presenter, Jörg Jürgens, is Chief Sales Officer at Spherity and OCI Co-Chair. After graduating in Business Admin from the Technical University of Munich, Jörg worked as a manager for a large German retailer and as a product owner for a software house for supply chain management services. And he joined Spherity as a first employee in 2018, and he's now responsible for industry solutions built on top of the Spherity Cloud Identity Wallet. Currently, Jörg is rolling out the credentialing service for authorized trading partners to enable compliance with the US DSCSA and represents Spherity on OCI, HDA, and PDG task forces for DSCSA. So we have a couple polls to get this thing started. So our first poll is, do you feel ready for DSCSA compliance? So yeah, please click the answer that fits best for you. In the meantime, Mark, what do you think we expect to see today?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on the audience, of course. That I do not, I do not know, but I would not expect a lot of yeses. Actually, I would not expect any yeses, to be very honest. I hope that there is about 75% of partially, and I think there is still a smaller group of people that feel unprepared. And so depending on the audience, I would say 70, 75 partially, and the rest is no.
Okay, awesome. Go ahead and get those last clicks in, and I will close the poll. Okay, so I'll show you the results. Is this what you're thinking, Mark?
No, and I'm surprised to see some people that are fully prepared, but that's good to know. That's good to know. I was expecting the 17 at the bottom, to be honest, but this is perfect.
Excellent. Cool. And I'll go on to the second poll, asking you all if you have an automated system for verification requests.
Yeah. On this one, I would expect, given the previous answer, that probably the yeses will be more in the 90% area.
I could see it too. Okay, I'll give you 10 more seconds before I close the poll. for everybody to click on their answer. Okay. So here we have the answers.
That's nice. Probably the reason why there is a higher no is that people have systems in place, but probably not for the verification requests, because that is one of the last things that people still need to implement at the moment. It's also one of the last slides we have. So.
Okay, awesome. Let's jump into the presentation, and I'll hand everything over to Mark.
Thank you very much, Emma. Yeah, four things we like to cover. We like to cover a little bit about the DSCSA in a practical way. What does it mean? What is this TI and TS in normal words? How can you actually onboard customers and suppliers? ATP, because that is where Spherity and Georg have a big piece. The review of the process of tracing requests, and then the legal requirements from the FDA and what has changed over the last 2 weeks, actually. So if you look at the DSCSA legislation, the whole idea actually for the US is to get a secure supply chain. So that is where this is all about. It was started 10 years ago, and it will actually end this year to have it fully implemented. But what does it actually mean in practical terms? So what do you need to do? Well, first of all, every trade item should be serialized. That should already be the case since 2019. Should all trade items be serialized? Another important thing, and that is what needs to happen as of November, is when the ownership changes, is that the seller should actually provide the buyer with an EPCS file. An EPCS file stands for an electronic product code information service, which is actually a file that contains information about what you have actually shipped. You should store this for 6 years. And what is also important is that when ownership changes, this can only change between authorized trading partners, people that have a license to do business with each other. Distributors should be able to verify a product if they want to sell the returns. So if they get a product back, they need to verify if what they receive back is still a product that is on the market, so they can resell it. And both these distributors and dispensers should be able to verify products for different reasons. They should also be able to do request and response to verifications, but requests and responses can only be done between ATPs, between authorized trading partners. And the supply chain partner should be able to respond to trace requests, and you should do that within 24 hours. Yeah? So this is in summary what the law actually entails by the end of this year. Interesting thing that you hear a lot in the market is, well, why do we need to have verifications? Because we have EPCS files, so we know what we have shipped, so we can always verify a product if you get it back, for example. That's partly true, you can do that, but that is actually what we call tracing. Yeah, so tracing means you actually go back from the endpoint, what is the previous one where you bought it from, and what are the details from the previous one you bought it from. When you do a verification, it's a little different because you go all the way back to the manufacturer. So that can mean that if you do a tracing back from the dispenser to the distributor, that the distributor can say, yes, this product I did provide, so it is on the market. But if they do a verification, it can mean, yes, the product is on the market, but it has been recalled, which will not be possible if you just check your EPCS files. So it is very, very important to do verifications and to be able to do verifications. Then today we have this TI, TS, and TH, the 3 Ts, how they know it in the market. What we will actually see as November is that we still need to provide TI and TS information, but now in an electronic format. And because the whole supply chain will actually exchange this information, the TH will disappear, the transaction H3, because based on the exchange TI, TS information, between business partners, you can reconstruct the whole history of a product, which is then, of course, the tracing. So what is this TI and this TS? Well, the transaction information, actually what it means is what are the items that you have shipped. You need to do that today, but you do it on a lot basis. With trade items being shipped, you actually need to show now what are the exact serial numbers that you have shipped. So you need to provide the serialized information. If you ship in containers, meaning cases or pallets, then you also need to provide the hierarchies. And in the US, it's also possible that trade items have hierarchies. So you can have a case that is serialized. Actually, it is required by law. You need to have it serialized, but the content is also serialized. Something we don't have in Europe, but we have it in the US. Well, at that moment, if you receive a case, then in that case, you have also serial numbers. Well, the serial numbers in that case are actually in the IPCS file. And what were the transaction numbers to actually do this transaction? So that we can always find back what was the underlying purchase order, things like that. The transaction statement is actually a statement saying who was the seller and who was the buyer. And where was it shipped from? And where was it shipped to? Because you can buy it from one location, but it was shipped from another location. And what is important is that because the law says you can only do transaction between authorized trading partners, it needs to be verified that both parties are actually trading partners, and that needs to be specified in a transaction statement. How does that look like in Movilitas.Cloud? Well, the transaction information, what is actually being shipped, you can actually see that, for example, on your supplier. So if you receive goods from your supplier, they need to provide you this information in an IPCS file, and we translate that information into readable data. Like what are the containers you received, what are the trade items you received, and if it are trade items, what is the hierarchy of those trade items? And you can see all the details like the product, you can see the lot, the expiration date, and the serial number. And you can also see that in this case, this is actually a case containing 3 trade items, and you can actually see that the middle numbers are all the same, which is logical because it is at the end the same product. And you can also see, in this case, the purchase order and the dispatch advice if you received it. The TS, the transaction statement. In Movilitas.Cloud, you can actually see that who was the supplier and which was the warehouse in which I received it. In this case, of course, it can also be that the supplier has multiple shipping addresses, so you can see the master data, it was sold from, and it was shipped from. And you can see your own master data. And of course, we have the same logic on the client. Then how does this work in this exchange of IPCS? Well, it's actually very simple. I mean, every time when a product changes ownership, then it actually requires the exchange of an IPCS file that contains the information we just talked about. So the manufacturer sends it to the distributor to the dispenser. And in reality, this drawing is, of course, a little bit more complex because a manufacturer has a lot of distributors. Distributors can also buy from other distributors, and people exchange products. But if they exchange products and the ownership changes, you are required to provide that file. What is also important is that file should arrive before the goods physically arrive. Because if you don't have that file, you're not allowed to receive the goods. That also means that if you're not able to provide a file, your customers are by law not allowed to actually accept the goods. So it's in your own benefit to be sure that you can actually provide this file. What is also important, you also need to provide a file to your clients. But if you don't receive a file with IPCS information, it might become very difficult to create a file, especially if you have aggregated items. Because if you receive a case that contains 50 items and you ship that case, then you can scan that case. But how do you know what is in the case? Because you need to provide it to the second level. So it's very important that you have that information because if you don't have that information, you cannot send the information. So that is very important. And the last thing why it is important, if there is a trace request, meaning a governmental body or another interested party is asking for a trace request, you need to be able to tell actually, well, who did you bought it from or who did you sell it to? Well, if you don't have that EPCS file, it becomes a little bit difficult to have that information. Yeah? So that is why it is so important that EPCS files are exchanged, and that is actually the whole idea about the US. Every trading partner needs to exchange data with every other trading partner. So if you need to exchange data, you need to onboard your customers and you need to onboard your suppliers. So what is the standard way of doing it? Well, an EPCS is a file, typically an XML file, that contains, as we said earlier, the TI and the TS information. So if you have a file and you want to exchange a file, there are file servers. And file servers is nothing else than a device that is holding files. Typically what is used in the industry is AS2, the applicability statement 2, and that is actually mainly used for EDI messages, the advanced shipping notifications that are used today. Yeah? It's a little bit an older protocol, it's a secure protocol, and it's mainly only used today still in the retail and heavily within the pharmaceutical industry. SFTP is a little bit simpler to use, is as secure, and that is actually the two most widely used ways of exchanging files. So what you do then actually, if I need to exchange a file with a business partner, well, I can put it into a file server, and then the other party can take it out of the file server. What is the advantage? Well, from a validation point of view, it's easy because if I create a file and I dump it somewhere, then there ends my responsibility, and somebody else needs to take it out of there, and there starts their responsibility. Of course, if you look at this schedule, then the first question is, okay, but who is going to provide the server? Because if two parties need to exchange something, we need to agree on what server are we going to use. So that is the first question. And of course, if I need to connect to multiple parties, I might have to connect to multiple of those file servers. Well, AS2 and SFTP are ways of exchanging files, but it doesn't say how it is being secured. How do you get access? And different people use different ways. You can use passwords, you can use keys, you can use certificates, you can have two-factor authentication. I mean, there are different ways of setting this up. VPN connections might be required. So there are different ways of authorization. So a lot of questions need to be asked. A lot of point-to-point connections need to be set up, need to be maintained. And then the question comes, well, do you have the dedicated IT staff to first of all set this up, to keep it operational, and if it doesn't work, to troubleshoot it? Because it's nice that, you cannot receive the file. Well, if the other party say, yeah, but we send it, and you cannot troubleshoot and say, did he send it or can I not access it? Because remember, if you don't have the file, you cannot accept the goods. And if your business partner says, yeah, but we provide it, what are you going to do? Yeah, so it's not an easy task. And that is also what we see in the US, that this is the biggest obstacle today, is getting all these companies connected to each other. And we will see on the last slide, it's also a reason why the law cannot be or will not be enforced actually at the deadline at the moment. But we also need to be sure that because of this complex process, we keep going to make sure that everybody is connected at least as quickly as possible. And I come back on that, why that is so important to do that as quickly as possible. So then the question becomes, you need to, at least if you're a distributor, if you're a manufacturer, you of course need to only send it out. But if you are in the middle, you need to be able to send and receive. So what do you need to do if you need to receive files? Well, it's actually the responsibility of your supplier to provide you that file. So it's basically also the provider who tells you how they're going to provide you that file. And they can do it in different ways. They can send it automatically. They can say, well, just tell me what is your SFTP or your AS2, and we send it, or what system do you have? We send it. Or a lot of times they say, well, we provide a portal. You can go there, you can download it. Well, if you have one supplier, that's nice. But if you have a whole bunch of suppliers, and every time for every shipment, you need to log in when something arrives to get the file, it becomes very complex. So the first thing you need to do is contact your suppliers and ask them how they're going to provide the file and what options they have. I know a lot of companies started this. I also know a lot of companies are still in the process of doing this to collect this information. Also ask them to provide you a sample file. Why? Well, IPCS is a standard, but it also allows to fill in custom fields. And that is actually used quite a lot. So it's not that simple that every IPCS file is the same. No, they're different. There are also different opinions about how to populate data sometimes. So it's a good standard, but you need to test it and you maybe need to tweak the content a little bit. Movilitas.Cloud, we have different options to receive your data. SAP ICH is an out-of-the-box connection. You can just turn it on. TraceLink, you can just turn it on because we have actually a connection to their SFTP server. RFXL, it's easy. They actually need to turn it on because they're using our SFTP server. LSpedia, again, it's easy. We're using their SFTP server and we are connected. Systec, they're even using a modern way to send it to an API. We do have an API endpoint that you can use, and you can just send IPCS files to that endpoint. That is how Systec is doing it. And we're working with the other providers also to work on ways of doing it. If you need to get it from a portal, that is also possible. You can just upload it on the supplier, and then we process the file. And of course, we also store the original file. Yeah? The beauty is we always process the file to get the TI and TS information out of it to make it generic. So the moment it is in our system, the data looks always the same, no matter from which provider you're gonna get it. When you're sending files to your clients, you are actually responsible for making sure that they get the file. So you also can determine how you will do that. So you need to contact your clients and ask them how they would like to receive it and explain your options. Then you can see if you can accommodate their request. Yeah. If they have no system in place, you can actually invite them as a partner over our system through email. It's very easy. You fill their email address, we send an email straight from the system. If they already registered, they can just accept it. If not, they can actually register and they don't have to do anything. They can just receive it automatically. And if they want, they can download an IPCS and we generate it on the fly. Yeah? The last option is that you download an IPCS and you provide it in whatever way they want. Yeah. What is important is that you need to make sure that you can receive IPCS before you like to ship, because if you don't have the details from what you're going to ship, you might not be able to generate it and run a test shipment on our acceptance environment. So you know that everything works correctly. So what are the available options? Well, you can invite your partner by email. At that moment, there is a connection. And then on the partner side, they will just see the information immediately. And if they want, they can download the IPCS if they want to do that. Yeah. What is also possible is that when you ship the products with our Movilitas mobile, that you can actually download the IPCS for them and then do it. And of course, we have all the automatic ways that we discussed earlier. On the receiving, we can also do that on the sending part. If you're using one of our competitor systems, we can connect to those systems also. So now I'm going to give the word to Georg to talk a little bit about the authorized trading partners.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Georg.
So, hi. So what you explained, all those data exchanges and exchanging IPCS, data, etc., because they need to travel with the product and arrive before the product. That's everything is being done between trading partners, and they should also be authorized. And that's basically the topic we want to talk about now. So in every company, of course, there are today processes in place to ensure that when you send a product, that they check on a frequent basis that the recipient of the product has the required licenses and is really who they say they are. So when sending physical products, there are solutions today available and out there. It's getting a little bit more challenging when we talk about data, when we exchange data, because this should also only be done between authorized trading partners. And here the trading partners at the end of the day then responsible to check again here if the requester of the data and the recipient then is also an authorized trading partner. So that's at the end, I would say in quote, simpler when you know the business partner, but in case we verify products, or when you talk about product verification as an example, the product verification can come from indirect trading partners. So dispensers, a manufacturer might not have a direct relationship with a dispenser who has ownership now of the product, and they need to verify it if the product is suspicious. So the dispenser scans the product, and a couple of seconds later, the request ends up at the manufacturer side, and then the manufacturer needs to decide in literally real time. Okay, how can I respond or not? Yeah, is the request authorized or not? And for that, there are at the end of the day two options. As usual, there's a manual process, deciding, okay, I park the request and look at this in a separate process and check if the requester is really who they say they are, or I automate this. But when we talk about a VRS, the parking option, there is no parking lot for a verification request, because you need to respond basically a couple of seconds later. Otherwise, the window actually closes, the communication channel gets closed. That's part of the system design. And additionally, there can be from let's look at a manufacturer side. The manufacturer can also refuse to respond and say, if I don't have any proof or any information if the requester is authorized or not, I'm declining to respond through my VRS service. And then they have alternative options to send the product verifications. So what we did over the last couple of years, we have to say, is to develop a solution to automate basically the process to know with whom you're sharing your product data with. So let's look at an example. We have here on the left side the VRS requester, and on the right side a VRS responder. And on the left side can be a dispenser, on the right side can be a manufacturer. So what we did is, basically what's being done today is there is a product verification message coming from a dispenser to the manufacturer. And in today's message, the only information the manufacturer has to know who the requester is the GLN, the global location number. But the global location number is at the end of the day kind of public information. Yeah? So anyone can take a global location number from another company and add it to a verification request. And then the manufacturer at the end has no option. They can't at the end. They should not trust the GLN or build their decision if the requester is an authorized trading partner just on the GLN. And together with compliance experts and industry experts, and we basically developed a solution which is today maintained by the Open Credentialing Initiative to really know with whom you're sharing data with and to know if the requester is authorized. So what we do is we answer a couple of questions. So the first question that we answer in using credentialing is, we know basically who is the trading partner. So with that, so basically who's the trading partner answers the question if the requester is really who they say they are. And additionally, we answer the question, is the trading partner authorized or not? So has the trading partner who's requesting a product verification a valid state license? So is the state license at this point of time, so today, valid or not? And additionally, we, of course, for audit, to have an audit record for a potential audit at a later point of time, we basically store everything away and say, okay, we did a ATP check that was connected to one product verification. And how we do this is at the end, it's basically a component. So the requester, when they create a verification request, we add an ATP credential, and the ATP credential is sent together with the verification request to the responder, and the responder can then verify basically or resolve the ATP credential, and we answer all the questions that are listed here below. And the good news is that everything is automated, and once you have decided to use credentialing, it's done in an automated way. So once you got onboarded to credentialing, so it runs in the background. It's basically a little bit, you can say it's a background service, and it's already integrated in Movilitas.Cloud as a solution. So we are partnering, basically with Mark, and Mark added this into his product, and now all of the customers can sign up or activate credentialing in Movilitas.Cloud, and then basically this is activated and runs in the background. So you muted, I think.
Yes, I muted myself. There was a dog barking here, so. So this is how we see how the two products are integrated. So the product from Spherity is called CARO, and Movilitas.Cloud actually is a full VRS provider. So that means we provide a lookup directory. I'm not going to go into detail, but that is an important piece to know who you send the request to, because there is no central system in the US. So that is a component to determine who's going to receive the request and needs to provide the response then actually. And we actually are both a requester and a responder. So for the requester on the left side, you typically use a mobile application. I will show you on the next slide how that looks like. We actually send a request, and what you actually see at the bottom here is actually the CARO interface. And here you actually see how you actually set up your identifiers from CARO within the Movilitas.Cloud system for the requester part. And as Gyura explained, actually, when you do a request, we actually go to the CARO system, we get some codes back that identify that you still have your licenses and you are okay. Or if you're not okay, we also get that, and then we add it, but then the request will not go out because it doesn't make sense because you're not authorized to do a request. Request is sent to the correct responder. The responder receives it. That can be us, that can be anybody else, or anybody else, any VRS responder that is allowed on the market. And on the responder side, we have the same. We have a different interface, but on the responder side, you actually define your GTINs for which you are going to provide a response. You can define the details of how you're going to respond, and you can actually add your identifiers as a responder. And again, they will be added then to the response. You can also turn it on and off, but we strongly recommend that you turn it on for everybody, because how can you otherwise determine that you're getting a request from an authorized trading partner and you're actually answering without knowing who it is? So that is how it is embedded. How does it look like, a verification with ATP? It's actually very simple. You open up your mobile app. That can be an iPhone, that can be an Android phone, that can be an industrial device, that can be a web browser. You actually select the reason. Recently, a couple of months ago, I think 2 months ago or something, or even maybe 1 month, version 1.3 of the GS1 lightweight message went out. Now you need to specify a reason why you do a verification request. So it can be for sellable returns. It can be because you need to check a suspect or a legitimate product. There can be an exception with the product, or it can be just to know the product status, which is already good. Yeah. You also need to specify if you have the product in possession. That is also required by law, because depending on if you have it in possession or not in possession, the respondent might decide to give you a different response. You can scan one pack, you can do matrix scanning. If you select matrix scanning, you actually activate a camera, and then everything that is visible in the camera will be scanned. And then actually, when you click on the button to verify all those screen products, it will actually show you two things. It will show you on the left side if the verification was correct. So you got a response and the verification was correct. The right side is actually showing, well, you got a response, but there is something wrong with who was responding. So the person that responded is not an authorized trading partner. Normally you wouldn't have so many red flags, but we're showing this on test data to show only one good one and the rest is false. So only the bottom one here you can see is green. That means the product is okay and the responder is an authorized trading partner, so you're okay. If you want to see the detail, you can swipe it to the left and then you can see all the details. So you can see what you actually scanned, serial number, the batch, expiration, the GTIN. You can see the VRS response. So the verification was true. The responder GLN, so this is the GLN of the responder that they put in, and the verification timestamp. But as Georg already said, a GLN is pretty much public information. So a GLN, everybody can respond and put a GLN in there. That doesn't mean that they're really the GLN that they say they are. So for that, you need to go through this process with Spherity, and then you get electronic credentials, and then you can see, well, the verified was true, and in this case, the responder name was the Movilitas pharma manufacturer, which is a test account, yeah, but it will normally show the name of the company, it will show the address details, and it will show the organizational type. So you know exactly from who you got a response. Yeah? So this is how you secure it, and it looks the same in the browser.
And may I add here, I think and what you explained, the user actually doesn't need to do anything. So when they scan, it just, I mean, it's a background process to add these credentials. It's there, put it this way, and it's just a little bit as an insurance to know with whom you're talking to. And then quickly give you also some insights where we are with the credentialing. So currently the first big manufacturers are turning this on in production. We have one wholesaler who's starting to use it as well. So you will see more and more credentials flying around coming in your VRS. And as it is still configured as optional, so users of VRS will still respond to those who sent a credential, and also those who will not send a credential. But the stabilization period, the intention is of course there to get more adoption out, to get the usage of credentials more as an habit and not as an exemption. And that's basically something we drive with our leading and big customers. And of course, credentials can be added also to tracing interactions to really know with whom you're sharing tracing requests with. This is currently being discussed in certain working groups. Then Mark talked about exchange of ePCIS messages. Of course, you know with whom you're doing business with, but then we have a digital world. Do you really know who is on the other side? Do you really know with whom you're sharing your product data, which is in the ePCIS message is a lot of valuable information. Yeah? So you should be sure with whom you're sharing data with. And this is also something which we can support with this credentialing process. And then we also look with some partners into adding this into commercial order release process. Yeah, can I automatically check basically the license of the recipient, which is especially also interested when a company does a lot of drop shipments. Yeah, so when you have ad hoc customers where you just need to send a product to an address, but of course you need to run a check if the address has a certain registration, like a DEA registration, or holds some licenses. So that can also be automated using this kind of technology. And at the end, it's again a background process. So again, it's done in the background, and you at the end have your web app or some data for audit reasons. So in case you run into an audit and you need to prove to FDA, hey, did you check if the trading partner you share data with was really authorized, you have basically a record of all the information together at one place. So it's very convenient at the end of the day and very helpful. So we looked with compliance people about in this and showed them the web app, and they were really happy that they have everything in one place connected to the transactions they have in their VRS. So we made them happy, and that's where we are.
Thank you. Then the tracing request. So we have a couple of things. ePCS message exchange, the biggest obstacle today. Verifications, where we saw the difference between doing a trace and doing a verification, which is important. And tracing request is something that is not done a lot yet, for the very simple reason that without having ePCS message exchange, it doesn't make sense to do a trace because there is nothing to trace. So you first need to have your ePCS in place before you can trace. So it's a forward and backward process. This is also related to the FDA 3911. But what is actually happening is that the tracing architecture functional design is actually made by PDG. So PDG is a lot of companies coming together to try to build a standard. This is the document, there is a blueprint, and at the moment, a lot of industry partners are coming together to build this solution in a standard way. So when you do a trace request, well, you first of all need to have a requester. So that can be a DSCSA authority, like a state authority or the FDA. It can be an authorized trading partner that is doing a request. But somebody needs to initiate the request. And then, of course, you have to respond or responders, because, I mean, it depends how deep you want to go. I mean, if I have a product and I want to have it completely traced back to the source, yeah, then I might need a couple of conceptual requests to the different ATPs that need to be done. So that is actually what needs to be done. The Center for Supply Chain Studies is running a pilot. We're part of that. And we're at the moment actually building the trace request because we already have a base responder available today. If you take a look at it, what is available today, we have a tracing UI. You see it on the right side. This is already in place. You can put a product, you can put a serial number. You can actually see the product master data from the US. You can actually see the transactions that took place on inbound. You can see the transaction, in this case only one, that took place on outbound. You can see the supplier, you can see the warehouse it was shipped to, and you can see where the warehouse shipped to what client. So this is what you have. We also have an API endpoint that is already available. You can click on that link when you receive the slides, and then you can send that request out, and you get this answer back automatically. What is in development? We're extending our verification app. So you saw the verification app that I showed a couple of slides earlier, where you can scan items. We are extending this at the moment that you can also scan one or multiple items and initiate a trace request. So you can fill out the form, you scan the items, you send a trace request, and the system will actually route it again to the right responder. We're also going to provide an open responder, just like we have an open responder for VRS. We're going to provide an open responder for trace requests, which is a little bit different than this endpoint, because this actually is an endpoint you can activate. This will be an open one. that you can also, of course, also activate, but there is less security on that one because we want to use the ATP credentials to build the security. Yeah. So a request comes in, you check who is sending this request. If they are allowed to send that request, you respond. If you say, sorry, but we have no clue who you are, or there are no ATP credentials, we just ignore you. And if you're sending more requests, we just block you completely, and we will never. What is needed for the market? Well, there is a GLN lookup directory. Yeah, so for VRS, there is a lookup directory for GTINs, because based on the GTIN, you know the manufacturer, and that way you know who has the answer to your question. When you talk about EPCS messages, it's all about who is the seller and the buyer. So it would be nice if you can base it on GLNs. Yeah, there are different discussions going on with some of the partners in the market to do it in different ways, but there needs to be a basis to know who you send it to. Movilitas.Cloud, we are actually involved in at least all the pilots we know about, and we will continuing to do that. The legal requirements by the FDA. Well, on the right side, you actually see the roadmap. It started in 2013. I don't think I tell anything new there. And by November 27 this year, everything needs to be in place and fully interoperable. But the market is really struggling with the EPSS message exchanges. We even heard, both Gerard and myself were at the HDA conference in the US 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And it became clear that yeah, this is the biggest hurdle in the market. Connect all the companies to all the companies. And that is a huge effort because we're talking about thousands of companies that needs to be connected to thousands of companies. The market is not ready. That is the bottom line. And the FDA actually also saw that. You also saw, I hope you learned from this, that if you have no EPSS in your inbound, you cannot generate it on the outbound. So that also means that if manufacturers or the first big distributors cannot provide you a message, you're already blocked. And if your suppliers block you, yeah, then you're also blocked. We also learned that the manufacturers, at least the ones that were speaking there, say that they were not ready to connect to their customers. And without this exchange, tracing is also not possible. So everything depends pretty much on this EPSS message exchange. Of course, verification, because you're going back to the source that is available, that is ready. There are at the moment a handful of VRS providers. We are one of them. And at the moment, a process is starting to get those systems certified. And I hope within the next couple of weeks, we will announce to the market that we have our certification in place as a VRS provider, including ATP. And the nice thing is also within our system, you can actually just click a button and then your process with CARO will also be started. So if you're using a requester or a responder, you just click on the button, request a CARO tenant, and everything will automatically be started. Spherity will get into action. They will send you some forms through their partner, like a SIM, that you need to upload some documents. When that process is done, everything is automatically installed. Yeah? So you have a one-stop shop to do this. What happened the Friday before the event in the US was there is that the document on the right was actually published by the FDA. And then during the week, another 2 documents were published. So the lawyers that were attending the event had a lot of work. But actually, the industry should strive to still implement it because the law is not extended, only the enforcement is extended. They will not enforce it because they allow you to fine-tune your system. They will not be happy if you don't do anything or if you stop your project. And I made that very clear also. The year is just meant to stabilize and make sure that everything is working correctly. We have, together with CARO, all the tools available to make you compliant before the deadline of November 27 this year. And again, if you're not compliant or you don't have the systems in place, of course, they don't enforce it till November 2024. But the problem is, if you don't have that system in place, then you don't have any data about EPCs you receive. And of course, you cannot distinguish between product when you ship it because everything is serialized. We're not talking about grandfathering of non-serialized product because that you can physically see. We talk about products that are serialized. And how can you determine on the shop floor or in the warehouse, if you have this product at hand, what process you need to follow? Did I receive an EPCs or not? Nobody knows. So don't wait, start implementing it as quickly as possible. The year is really to onboard and stabilize EPS Exchange, implement tracing, and really optimize your business process. Yeah. That is pretty much what we had to say about the event. Just a couple of words about the engineering group. Movilitas.Cloud is part of the engineering group. I mean, we are a very big group, over 12,000 employees, and we keep hiring people. We have a lot of offices in the market. I don't know why it moved ahead. 60 offices. Headquarters is here in Europe, in Rome. We have also the head office in the US in Chicago. We're doing at the moment about 1.5 billion on revenue. So I think it's important that you see that we are a very stable group. Engineering Industries Excellence is the industrial division of engineering, headquartered in Chicago. We have also offices for Movilitas.Cloud here in Belgium, where we are located, and you can see all the different offices around the globe. So the message about this slide is actually that by using Movilitas.Cloud in combination with CARO, that you're actually choosing a stable business partner. That's about what we had to say. Over to you, Emma.
Okay, thank you, Mark and Georg, for today's presentation, and we can get into the Q&A. So for everybody listening, we've got a few questions already, but if you have your own question, type it into the question box in the Q&A section in the sidebar of GoToWebinar. And I'll start with the ones that we already have here. So the first question is, do I have to prove who I am upon getting a verification request?
You want to take that one?
Yeah, let me rephrase that. I understood that correctly. So to prove who I am when I get the verification request. I think the key answer here is basically first step is to verify who actually sent you the verification request. That's step one. There is of course some legal requirement to know with whom you're sharing data with. And I think every company they have business processes and business requirements coming also from legal and compliance. So I think looking into this is always helpful, because at the end of the day, first you need to decide with whom you're sharing data with, and then you need to follow internal processes, of course, laws, and we can help you with those solutions with credentialing. And on the outbound, when you send back your request to a wholesaler, of course, they also might have the policy of not accepting a response message when they don't know for whom they got the response, because they just send out a verification request electronically out into the blue, into this VRS world, and then they get out of the blue from someone a request, and the responder might not be the own service provider. It can be another service provider, it can be another company, so a lot of parties are between. So we recommend also to look into requesters, which are sometimes dispensers and wholesalers, to say, okay, please look into the response and check who the other side is and who gave you the information, if the product was in good standing.
But the bottom line is the law says that you're only allowed to share data with an authorized trading partner. So if you don't check it, and it is not an authorized trading partner in principle, you're not following the law. So
yeah.
So the short answer is yes, I think. Does that answer the question, Emma?
I think so. I'll move on to the next one. How long does it take to implement the solutions presented today?
Well, I mean, pure technically to get started, I mean, Movilitas.Cloud is easy. I mean, you go to Movilitas.Cloud, which is obvious. There is a login button. And if you don't have an account, you can register and you can start using the system. So you can have the system at the end of this event, and then you can configure the whole system. Reality is, of course, that from a configuration point of view, we talk about hours or days when it comes to Movilitas.Cloud. The problem is, however, because some companies might say, well, if it is that easy, then why don't I wait till October 2024 and I just use the last weeks and be compliant? The problem is a little bit more complex because, as I was trying to say, is you need to connect to all your suppliers. So first of all, you need to know how are they going to provide it, and that is out of your control and out of our control. The second thing, you need to get then the connection set up. And a lot of times that means that their supplier need to do some work. And that takes time where we have no control over. Then you need to have a test file that can be not correct. Then we need to do some work and find out why it is not correct. Partly under our control, but not completely under our control. The same with your clients, although that is a little easier because you can say, well, I invited them, and if they don't respond, it's their problem. But still, if they don't respond, they're not allowed to receive your products if they don't have the file. So pure technically with our solution, it's very, very fast. Practically speaking, and what we see in real life, it's taking a long, long time to get stabilized. And then you need to integrate it. I hope you can still hear me now. Can you still hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can.
Okay. And then actually the next thing is that you need to, most of the time, integrate it with your own business process. You need to write your SOPs. You need to get your people trained. So, I mean, if you haven't started, then I think you need to get started ASAP. And the last reason, as I said earlier, how are you going to distinguish products that you received before 2024 and after 2024 in a practical way? So you might save some money today in not having a subscription because our model is subscription based, but you will lose it at the end. And keep in mind, the law is still being in effect in November of this year. The FDA is not going to enforce it. That doesn't mean that the states are not going to enforce it. And that doesn't mean that FDA can check what you're doing today. And they're going to check and see what you're doing. So they can still penalize you for other things you're not compliant with. So I wouldn't take the risk. That's the bottom line, I think.
It's good to know. The next question is on the dispenser side. The question is, how long must a dispenser maintain their DSCSA records?
In principle, 6 years. That is what they need to do. With Movilitas.Cloud, we don't throw away any data because we feel that the data can be valuable for your own analysis also. But the minimum is 6 years that you need to give.
Okay, and then one last quick question. We'll finish up on time. How long do I have to respond to a trace request?
They probably mean how quickly do I need to respond to a trace request? I'm assuming that will be the question. Yeah, you have 24 hours to respond because I know a lot of companies say, okay, you just keep your EPCS files, you store them, you search through them, and that way you can actually create a response. That is true, and that is good if you receive 1 or 2 requests a year. If that volume goes up, it starts to become pretty expensive if you do it on a manual basis. And the expectation is that, yeah, when this whole thing gets in place, that more and more requests will come, because keep in mind that fake medicines is a big issue worldwide, in Europe, in the US, in other parts of the world, it's worse, but there are an enormous amount of products on the market that are fake. So and having all the systems in place means we can ban those. But if we ban those, it also means that we have a lot more requests for fake products. So and that is why we're doing all this, to have a safe supply chain. So
That makes sense. That's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, Mark and Georg, and to everybody who attended. Thanks for the questions. Definitely don't forget to get the handouts from the GoToWebinar panel on the side. And we know your time is valuable, and on behalf of our entire team, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Have a great day.
thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Bye. Thank you, Mark.